There's a strange detail buried in the records of the Stoics, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Most of them were not monks. They weren't sitting cross-legged on a quiet mountain, far from the noise, waiting for enlightenment to arrive. They were generals on the edge of battle. They were slaves owned by other men. They were statesmen, exiles, and in one case, the single most powerful human being alive. They lived through plagues that emptied whole cities. They buried children. They were betrayed by people they trusted and slandered by people they ruled. And out of all of that, they built something we are still reaching for 2,000 years later. They built calm. Here is the part almost everyone gets backward. We tend to assume these people found peace because somehow their lives let them. That if our own lives would just settle down, if the inbox would empty, if the money would steady, if the people around us would behave, then calm would finally show up, like a guest who only comes when the house is clean. But that's not what happened to them, and it's not how it works for you either. They didn't discover calm in the quiet. They forged it in the chaos, because chaos was the only material they were ever given. And that distinction is the whole game. So let me say plainly who I think you are, because if I'm right, the next half hour is for you. You're the one who handles things. People bring you problems because you stay level when others don't. From the outside, you look composed, maybe even unshakable. But on the inside, there's a low hum that never quite switches off, a background dread. You refresh the news one more time before bed, telling yourself you just want to be informed. You lie awake at 2 in the morning, replaying a conversation, editing what you should have said. You move through your days with the quiet, exhausting sense that the wheel keeps getting yanked out of your hands by whatever happens next. You're not falling apart. You are just tired of being at the mercy of everything. If that's you, stay with me. Because the Stoics were not promising you a quieter world. They were offering you a steadier you. And that turns out to be the only version of this that actually holds. Let's begin where they began, with a sorting. Picture everything that's pressing on you right now as objects scattered across a table. The Stoics would have you do something almost violent in its simplicity. Sweep every single one of those objects into one of 2 piles. In the first pile goes everything that is actually yours to govern. What you choose, what you say, where you put your attention, the effort you decide to make. In the second pile goes everything else. The economy, other people's moods, the traffic, the weather. What happened yesterday? What a stranger thinks of you. The outcome of almost anything once you've done your part. And then comes the hard rule, the one that changes a life if you let it. You only get to keep the first pile. The second one was never yours to carry, no matter how tightly you've been gripping it. Almost all anxiety, when you trace it back to its source, is the same mistake repeated. It's spending your energy on the second pile as if it belonged in the first. It's pouring your strength into things that will not move no matter how hard you push, and then feeling crushed when they don't move. Let me show you what this looks like in the smallest, most ordinary moment. 2 people are stuck in the same dead-stopped traffic, same road, same red brake lights stretching to the horizon, and both of them are already late. The first man grips the wheel until his knuckles ache. He leans on the horn as if noise could melt steel. He starts narrating a story to himself, the one where this always happens to him, where the universe has a personal grudge, where he can never catch a break. By the time the cars finally inch forward, his jaw is tight, his chest is tight, and he arrives shaking and useless, carrying the jam into the rest of his day. The second man looks at the exact same wall of cars and notices something simple. This is not moving, whether I panic or not. The traffic is precisely as immovable when he's calm as when he's furious. So he reaches over, picks up his phone, and makes the call he's been avoiding for a week. Same red lights, same 20 minutes lost. But one of them arrived wrecked, and the other arrived with something finished. 2 completely different nervous systems sitting in identical conditions. And the only difference was which pile they were standing in. So here's the first practice, and it's small enough to use today. Several times a day, when you feel that familiar tightening, name the thing. Say what it actually is. And then ask one clean question. Is the next move mine, or is it not mine? That's it. If the next move is yours, good, make it. Put your whole self into it. But if it isn't yours,
If you've been gripping something that was never in your hands, you are allowed to set it down. Not because you've stopped caring, because carrying it changes absolutely nothing, except the cost it extracts from you. Now, the moment you start sorting, you'll notice something uncomfortable. So much of what spikes you doesn't even come from the event itself. It comes from the story you wrap around it before you've had time to think. The Stoics caught this 2,000 years ago, and it might be their sharpest observation of all. Events don't disturb you. Your judgment about events disturbs you.
And between the two, between the thing that happens and the way you react, there is always a sliver of space. Calm lives in that sliver. The whole art is learning to widen it. Watch how thin that sliver usually is. A message lands in your inbox. 4 words. We need to talk. That's all it says. And in the space of a few seconds, before you've taken a single breath, your body has already written an entire tragedy. You're being fired. They're furious with you. You've ruined something you can't repair. Your heart is pounding over 4 words on a screen. You read them again, looking for the threat, and the threat grows. And then, hours later, sometimes days later, you find out they wanted to offer you a project they're excited about. Nothing in the message ever changed, not one letter. The panic, every bit of it, was authored by you. By the unexamined story you bolted onto a neutral fact at the speed of fear. We don't react to the world. We react to our running commentary about the world. And most of us never notice the commentary at all. Because it's been narrating since we were children, and we've mistaken its voice for reality itself. But here's the good news hidden in that. If the suffering is coming from the story, and the story is yours, then you have a say in it that you never knew you had.
So the next time something spikes you, the message, the look on someone's face, the tone in a voice, try inserting a single sentence before you respond. Just one. This is the event, and here is the story I'm adding to it. Say it plainly, even silently to yourself. There is the fact, 4 words in an inbox, and here is the story. I'm in trouble. The instant you separate the two, you can feel the story lose about half its grip. It stops being the truth and goes back to being what it always was, a guess, an old reflex, one possible interpretation among many. And in that small gap, the next move comes back into your hands. But let's be honest about what sits underneath a lot of this. Much of our dread isn't about what's happening. It's about what we're terrified might happen, the loss we can't bear to picture. And here, the Stoics did something that strikes most people, at first, as almost grim. They turned and looked straight at it. The instinct when we love something or rely on something is to refuse to imagine losing it, as if not thinking about it could somehow keep it safe. But fear of loss is loudest precisely when we pretend loss is impossible. The thing we won't look at grows in the dark. So the Stoics did the opposite. They rehearsed the storm before it came. I once spoke with a surgeon I would trust with my life, and she told me something her colleagues found morbid.
The night before a difficult operation, she pre-plays the worst version of it in her mind. The unexpected bleed, the equipment that fails at the wrong moment, the walk down the hall afterward to tell a family the news no one wants to hear. She doesn't do this to frighten herself. She does it so that nothing can ambush her. And on the table the next day, she is the steadiest person in the room. Not despite having imagined disaster, but because of it. She has already met the worst in her mind and rehearsed where her hands would go. Now compare her to the person who refuses to even consider a layoff until the morning the email arrives and is simply leveled by it, flattened, because it came from a direction they'd never let themselves look. One of them met the storm on her own terms, calmly, in advance. The other got hit from behind. So once a week, give yourself 5 quiet minutes to do something that sounds dark but works like medicine. Imagine, gently, losing something you depend on. The job, your health, a person you love. Don't dramatize it and don't wallow in it. Just look at it steadily, the way you'd look at weather rolling in across a valley. You are not doing this to torture yourself. You're doing it to rob the fear of its one real weapon, which is surprise. And there's a strange gift on the other side of it.
When you walk back into your actual life,
The job you still have, the person still here, the body still carrying you around. You tend to see it clearly for the first time in a long while. The thing you imagined losing becomes suddenly, almost unbearably present. That's not morbidity, that's gratitude, arriving through the back door. Now, sometimes the loss isn't hypothetical. Sometimes it's already happened, and you find yourself doing the most exhausting thing a human being can do. Arguing with a fact. Standing in front of a reality that has already arrived and insisting it shouldn't have. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. This isn't how it was supposed to go. And every ounce of energy you spend in that argument is energy stolen from the only thing that could actually help you now. Picture a climber partway up a mountain. He reaches a pitch he'd planned for and finds the route simply gone. Rockfall has torn it away. The line he memorized no longer exists. Now he has two choices, and only two. He can stand there and curse the mountain for being the wrong shape. He can burn daylight and oxygen and breath, railing against a fact that will not, under any circumstances, negotiate with him. Or he can say, flatly, almost coldly, "Okay, this is the situation now," and start reading the rock for a new line. The mountain does not care which he chooses. It feels nothing for him either way. But notice, only one of those two climbers is still moving. Only one of them is going to get down safely. The other is just freezing slowly while he argues with stone. The Stoics had a way of putting this that has survived because it's true. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. The thing in your way is not separate from the way. It is the way now. This isn't some cheerful slogan about how every problem is secretly a gift. You don't have to love the boulder that fell across your road. You just have to stop pretending it isn't there, because the pretending is what keeps you stuck. Acceptance, the real kind, is not surrender. It's not giving up, and it's not approving of what happened. It's simply turning to face forward, so that your strength, which is real, which is considerable, can finally do something useful instead of pounding itself against the past. So catch yourself in that phrase, "This shouldn't be happening." The moment you hear it in your own head, swap it for another. This is happening, so what's the most useful next step from here? The first sentence chains you to a reality you cannot change. The second one puts your feet back under you. Same situation, completely different relationship to it. One keeps you arguing with what's already done. The other puts you back in motion. There's another move the Stoics understood, and it works on a problem most of us never name. The problem is that we look at our worries from 2 inches away, pressed right up against them, where they fill the entire field of vision and block out everything else. A crisis viewed from that close stops looking like one thing among many and starts looking like the whole world. So you have to learn, deliberately, to step back, to widen the frame. The astronauts have a name for the most extreme version of this. They call it the overview effect. From orbit, looking down, the borders they were raised to fear simply vanish. There are no lines on the real Earth, only land and water and weather. Entire wars, the ones consuming the news cycle, become completely invisible from up there. The whole planet, every person who has ever lived, and everyone you've ever loved or feared, fits beneath a raised thumb. Something in them rearranges permanently when they see it. And you don't need a rocket to borrow a little of that. You can do a small version from your own kitchen. Take the thing eating you alive today, the one that's been chewing at the back of your mind, and ask it a few honest questions. Will this specific worry still matter in 5 years? Will a single person remember it in 50? Zoom out far enough, and you'll find that most of what we call emergencies turn out, in the end, to be Tuesdays. Just Tuesdays, dressed up as the end of the world. Now hear me carefully, because this is easy to get wrong. The point of the zoom out is not to belittle your life or to tell you nothing matters. Your life matters enormously. The point is to stop a passing weather system from feeling like the climate. To stop one bad afternoon from masquerading as your whole existence. So, when a worry has you by the throat, run the zoom in steps. How big is this in the scale of this hour, this year, this lifetime, this century? Not to make yourself feel small and insignificant. That's a different and uglier move. But to set the problem back to its true size, so that you can breathe again, and breathing, choose. So far, everything I've described is something you do in the moment, when the storm is already on you. But the Stoics knew something deeper. which is that calm in the storm is mostly built long before the storm arrives. It's built in the way you live on the ordinary days. And here they say something that runs directly against the entire grain of modern life. A mind kept in total comfort doesn't grow strong, it grows fragile. Wrap yourself in cushioning long enough and you start to read every small discomfort as a genuine emergency. The slightly cold room, the hunger that isn't really hunger, the boredom of an unfilled minute. To the overcomforted nervous system, all of it registers as threat. Think about why firefighters don't meet smoke for the first time during a real fire. They rehearse in heat and darkness, again and again, until something in the body learns a quiet, unshakable fact. I have been somewhere this hard before, and I was fine. They are building evidence, deposit by deposit, against the day they'll need it. And you can build the very same evidence in laughably mundane ways. Take the stairs when the elevator doors are standing open and waiting. Sit with hunger for an hour instead of reaching for something the second your stomach murmurs. Leave your phone in another room and let the boredom itch at you without scratching it. Step into a cold shower for the last 30 seconds and don't flinch away. None of these will change your life on their own. That's not the point. The point is that each one is a small deposit into an account you'll be very glad to have. Because one day, life is going to hand you something genuinely heavy, something you didn't choose and can't refuse. And in that moment, instead of buckling, some older and steadier part of you will look at it and say, I know this feeling. I've practiced being uncomfortable and surviving it. This is just more of that. So pick one small, deliberate discomfort this week and choose it on purpose. Not because suffering is noble, it isn't, and the Stoics weren't masochists, but because every time you voluntarily step into a little hardship and come out the other side intact, you are teaching your nervous system the single most calming lesson there is. Discomfort is information. It is not catastrophe. The two have been confused inside you for years, and you can begin, in small doses, to pull them apart. Now we come to the part of all this that costs the most pride and gives back the most freedom. Because if you've done the sorting honestly, you've already had to put something painful in the second pile. Your reputation, what people say about you, how others choose to treat you, all of it outside your walls. None of it yours to command. And the ego absolutely hates this. But stay with it, because there's a fortress hiding inside this hard truth, and once you find it, no one can take it from you. Imagine someone insults you in a meeting, sharp, public, deliberate. The instant reaction is to feel robbed of your standing in the room, of your composure, of something. But look very closely at what actually happened, frame by frame. They offered you an emotion. They held out anger or contempt, and they offered it to you. And you, this is the part we never see. You reached out and accepted it. You took it into your own hands and made it yours. The Stoics held something that sounds impossible until you've tested it. An insult only truly lands if you agree to be insulted. The remark belongs to the person who said it. But the wound, the lingering sting, the replay at 2 in the morning, that is something you administer to yourself long after they've forgotten they ever spoke. Marcus Aurelius governed an entire empire while being slandered almost constantly, by rivals, by people he'd helped, by people who wanted what he had. And in his private notes, the ones he never meant for us to read, he wrote something close to this, that the best revenge is simply to not become like the person who wronged you. Think about the steadiness that takes. The person who can hear contempt aimed straight at them and stay level hasn't won the argument. They've won something far better and far rarer. They've kept the one thing that was ever genuinely, unshakably theirs. Not their reputation, which lives in other people's heads where they can't reach it. Their character, their response, the inner ground that no one can storm without being handed the key. So the next time someone hands you their anger or their contempt, pause for one heartbeat before you pick it up. Ask the question that changes everything. Is this mine to carry or theirs? You are allowed to let a remark pass straight through you without becoming its host. without giving it a warm place to live inside your chest for the next 3 days. The words were theirs, the peace can stay yours. And there's one final lens the Stoics used, the sharpest of all, and I want to leave you with it because it puts everything else in order. They kept reminders of death close at hand. Not because they were morbid, not because they were in love with darkness, but because they had discovered that remembering your time is finite is the most reliable cure ever found for sweating the trivial. Death, faced honestly, turns out to be a kind of editor. It reads through the long, cluttered manuscript of your worries and quietly crosses out everything that doesn't deserve your one wild life. Ask anyone who's had a genuine brush with mortality, a diagnosis that turned out to be wrong, an accident they walked away from, and they'll tell you the same eerie thing. Afterward, the slow checkout line simply stopped mattering. The driver who cut them off became a non-event, but the phone call to someone they loved became unmissable, urgent, the most obvious priority in the world. Here's what's strange about that. They didn't learn any new information. They already knew, the way we all know, that life is short and doesn't last. They just, for the first time, actually felt it.
The knowing dropped the long distance from the head to the chest and finally landed. The Stoics tried to keep that feeling on purpose, without needing the catastrophe to deliver it. Because a borrowed afternoon, and every afternoon you get is borrowed, is far too precious to spend rehearsing old grudges and refreshing fresh outrage. The chaos of the world gets remarkably quiet when you hold it up against the one deadline none of us escapes. Suddenly, you can see what's actually large and what only pretended to be. So when you catch yourself about to spend your hard-won peace on something small, ask the blunt question and let it do its work. If my time were genuinely short, and it is, it always was, would this get a single minute of it? Most of the time, the honest answer is no, and you can feel the day reorganize itself around that no, the trivial falling away, the true rising up to meet you. Which brings us back to where we started, and to the quiet reframe this has all been pointing toward. You probably came in believing, somewhere underneath, that calm is the reward, the thing you finally get to feel once the chaos stops, after this deadline, after this hard season, after things settle down. But I need to tell you the truth the Stoics built their lives on. The chaos does not stop. It never has, for anyone, in the whole history of the species. There is no clearing on the far side of it where the calm is waiting for you. And once you really absorb that, something loosens. Because if calm isn't the reward for surviving the storm, then it has to be something else entirely. It's the discipline you carry into the storm. The one move that stays yours no matter what the world does next. The Stoics did not win because life went easy on them. You've seen the lives they led, the plagues, the exiles, the betrayals, the wars. They won because they stopped trying to govern the ungovernable and turned all of that fierce energy onto the one square foot of ground they actually owned. Their own response, their own attention, the space between what happened and what they did next. That square foot is yours too. It has been the whole time, under everything, waiting for you to stand on it. And here's the gentlest part. You don't have to wait for a crisis to begin. You can start the training with the very next thing that tries to throw you today. The next message that spikes you, the next line of traffic, the next sharp word, the next plan that falls apart, the next 2 a.m. when your mind starts to spin. Each one is no longer just an interruption. Each one is a repetition. A chance to practice setting down the second pile, to name the story you're adding, to face forward, to zoom out, to ask whether this would survive 5 years or 50. Calm stops being a feeling you chase and becomes a thing you do, again and again, until one day you notice it's simply who you are. If something in this settled into you, if you felt that low hum quiet down even for a moment, then stay close, because there's more here for anyone serious about building a mind that holds steady when everything around it doesn't. This was one lesson. There are others waiting, each one another square foot of ground to stand on. So take a slow breath, let this sit with you tonight, and let the next lesson find you when you need it most. The world isn't going to get any calmer, but you can, and that,
it turns out, was always the only part that was up to you.